Okay, this is Antony Carpen here at the Cambridge Union with Green Party leader Natalie Bennett, so Green Party are for England and Wales. And Natalie, you're shortly due to stand down, so this, I guess, is your final visit to Cambridge in your capacity as leader, I guess, is this?
Probably not, I suspect, because I do come to Cambridge quite often, and I will actually, my 2-year term finishes at the end of August.
Oh, right.
So that's a few months away. So I think the odds are I'll be back in Cambridge once or maybe even a couple of times before I stand down as leader. And it is also worth saying that although I'm standing down as leader, I'm not going away from politics.
Yep.
I'm still intending to campaign on lots of the same issues I've been campaigning on, support local Green parties, so I'll probably just keep coming back, and Cambridge is quite a nice place to come back to.
We've just had the local elections here, and across England and Wales, and also in Scotland, we saw mixed results. So, for example, we saw with the Greens, you got a number of new MSPs, but perhaps didn't do as well as expected in, let's say, Norwich or Cambridge. I wonder what your thoughts were on that mixed picture.
Well, I think mixed is exactly the right word for it, and for the Scottish Green Party, who of course have the advantage of a fair proportional election system, they trebled their number of MSPs and it will have a really powerful place in the new Parliament. Also Northern Ireland, which has got a lot less publicity, but we doubled our representation in the Northern Ireland Assembly, so that was great. It was disappointing that we didn't get a representation on the Welsh Assembly, and there were some disappointing results here in East Anglia. I think for us it was... there's things to learn from this, but there's also the particular circumstances. Each election is its own election. And I think what we did do was we stood in 54% of the seats this time in this round of elections, whereas previously 4 years ago, the same elections, we'd only stood in 25% of the seats. So the Green surge saw us able to present our case to lots more voters, give lots more voters the chance to vote Green. What we saw, I think, was there were some arguments being put, particularly for people who might sway between Labour and Green voters, a feeling like some people thought they had to support Jeremy Corbyn. I think what we've got to do is redouble our efforts to explain how the Greens have a unique political philosophy, green political philosophy which understands we have to live within the environmental limits of our one fragile planet, whilst also ensuring that everyone has access to resources of a decent quality of life. And that's a complete political philosophy, a unique political philosophy. And of course we've also got, I think, excellent things, original things to say on things like education, our schools not being exam factories, on the kind of structure of our economy, moving away from finance, supporting small independent businesses. So I think we've got all that package there. Our challenge is really to find one sentence to express it all. We're still working on that.
Now, one of the things you mentioned was, both with this year and also last year at the general election, the significant increase in the number of candidates and the overall percentage of seats that you are standing in. What's been the difference that's encouraged lots of people to stand in elections over the past 2 years compared to in previous years? What have candidates that you've met all over the country said to you?
Well, the key thing really, of course, was the Green surge, the more than trebling of our membership last year. And if I look back over my 4 years as leader, we've now got more than 4 times the number of members we had 4 years ago. So obviously we have a lot more capacity, a lot more people are there. And I think what pushed that was a lot of people had actually always thought of themselves perhaps as a small g Green. Many of them had thought there was no point in doing party politics because they thought it was so hopeless. And as we got more attention through the general election campaign, those people came on board, saw that you can achieve things through party politics, that you can get Greens elected, that we are part of the coming political age, and now one of the major parties of Britain. And so that really was the change of giving us the capacity to then be able to come forward and contest all those seats. And we stood in 93% of the seats in the general election, and that was the previous general election had been just over 50%, so it was a huge increase.
And that was quite a milestone that you passed for the Greens in getting over 1 million votes.
Exactly, and 1.1 million votes. If we had a fair proportional election system, we'd now have 25 MPs in Parliament. Of course, the reality is because of the first past the post system, a system that's seen us get a government that only won the support of 24% of eligible voters. That's the system we're in now. Campaigning to change it is one of the big focuses for the Green Party now, and I'm sure will be in the future, and certainly will be for me as well. But we've still shown also that we can beat that system. We beat that system with getting Caroline Lucas elected. We got terribly, agonisingly close in Bristol West to getting another MP. We finished second in 4 seats around the country, which we'd never done before in any general election seat. So there's lots of positives there and things to build on.
Now, with the leadership election coming up, obviously one of the things that we often hear in the press is how the Greens are very much identified to Caroline as the sole MP in the House of Commons. Obviously you've got Jenny Jones in the House of Lords. Given the increase in membership and given the increase in media scrutiny that you are now getting, how do you see the future for the Greens in avoiding the risk that all of the media attention goes through perhaps just 1, 2, 3 people?
Well, that's one of the reasons why I've chosen to not re-stand as leader after serving my 2 terms, because I think given that we haven't yet got a fair proportional election system, one of the ways in which we can give people profile, give people a chance to come forward, give voters the chance to get to know them, is by using our leadership positions. And Caroline Lucas, when she stood down 4 years ago, it was a real surprise to the party, but she did that with the explicit intention of allowing other people to get the profile, to get the attention. And I think it has spread out a great deal. We can spread it even further. One of the possibilities that I think quite a few people are exploring at the moment is the Constitution allows for co-leaders, so we could have a joint male and female co-leader. And again, that would help to demonstrate that the Green Party is different to other parties. I mean, I'm very proud of the fact that I was the first female political leader to take over from another female leader of a party in British political history. I think the first co-leaders might be quite nice as well, potentially. We'll see how the field pans out. But we're also demonstrating that the Green Party does politics differently. It's not a greasy pole where people are scrambling to get to the top and then clinging on by their fingernails. We can share the power, the access, the opportunities around. And that's something that I think people can really appreciate about Green Party politics being different.
Now, talking about Green Party politics being different, 2 years ago when you came to visit and campaign in Cambridge with Rupert Read, who was standing as the lead candidate in the European Parliament elections, we also saw a number of European Green politicians, including Scar Keller, who came to campaign in England and Wales. We've got the European Union referendum coming up. We've had a lot of noise in the media, and one of the things I've noticed is we haven't heard much in terms of positive messages. So my question to you is, what is the Green Party's vision for where the UK could be in 2030, assuming we vote to stay in? Will it be business as usual, or what is the potential for the UK and the whole of Europe should we decide to stay in?
Well, I think there will be change, that's the certainty, and there's a reason why the Green Party campaign, the hashtag might be Greener In, but the campaign is called Greens for a Better Europe. And we're, while calling very strongly for a Remain vote, and not in any way saying that Europe is perfect, far from it. Then again, of course, Westminster is very far from perfect, and the answer is not to give up on democracy, but to stay in and fight to reform it. So the kind of vision of the sort of Europe that I'd be seeing, say, in 2030 would be, we've already seen some reforms where the power of the elected European Parliament has risen relative to the power of the unelected Commission. We want to see that go much further. We want to see far less power concentrated in Brussels, Brussels acknowledging that decisions should be made at the right level, and for some things, like if we're talking about things like air and water pollution, fish stocks and other wildlife, those things don't stop at national borders. They need to cross the whole spread. So we're making those decisions still at that level, but then we're devolving many more decisions down locally. A couple of other key things, just Fortress Europe has to stop. We have to be welcoming an appropriate number, a fair share of refugees to Europe. They have to be able to come here safely without risking their lives in the Med, as we've just been hearing about again more this morning. And we need to, we will have stopped TTIP. I'm confident we're going to stop TTIP because there's a strong civil society cross-Europe campaign against that. And one of the things I think we can see in Europe in 2030 is a much more civil society Europe, where we've seen successful campaigns against neonicotinoids, the really dangerous bee-harming chemicals. On glyphosate, at the moment, it looks like we've made some real progress on that. That's Roundup, the herbicide. So we're actually seeing a growth of a real people's movement across Europe. So what I would say by 2030, what we want is a people's Europe, a social Europe, one that defends workers' rights, protect communities, let them make decisions for themselves, whilst also really clamping down on and controlling the big multinational companies. Companies that we certainly would struggle hugely to do at a single nation level, but Europe, as that major market, has real power and force to take on the tax dodgers, take on the law dodgers.
Because it's a similar theme I've mentioned to others. If your firm's a multinational, your regulator needs to be multinational, and the challenge being, how do you make that regulator democratically accountable to the people? So, kind of with that in mind, are there one or two specific powers or specific policies you would like to see brought in that would give the European Parliament more powers? So, for example, can you think of a power that you would like the European Parliament to have that it doesn't currently have? It might be, for example, such as being able to bring in a specific tax on multinationals who are otherwise able to base themselves in tax havens, for example.
Well, I think one of the key things is it kind of happens now, but in a very indirect manner. Simply want the Parliament to be able to propose legislation. We should be able to see that happening, through perhaps a single member, probably more realistically a party or a group in the European Parliament, simply saying, we want to bring this legislation in, and that would be the sort of legislation you could do through that mechanism. At the moment, it kind of needs to go through the Commission. I'd want to see that lawmaking power rest much more firmly with the Parliament. One of the other key things is at the moment, the Parliament has the power to recall the whole Commission, but it doesn't have the power to recall individual commissioners. And so bring that power in, and it's a little bit like the sort of scrutiny that you see in America when Supreme Court judges have to be confirmed by the Congress. So really give more power to the Parliament as opposed to the Commission, and particularly individual commissioners. And that would mean there's much more democratic scrutiny over how the EU is operating.
Now, since you became Green Party leader, obviously your profile has gone through the roof as far as the media is concerned. What's it been like being in the middle of that, in the middle of those media firestorms that you found yourself in, and what advice would you have to your successor who perhaps may not have had that experience in facing the likes of Andrew Neil or other interrogators that we see on politics shows?
Well, I think one of the things is that what was difficult about my personal situation and the Green Party's situation in the middle of the Green Surge was that the way we got treated by the media changed almost overnight. We went from being a small bit of entertainment where you just get trotted on for 5 minutes, get a few very predictable questions, and then get trotted off again. And it changed overnight. And we didn't then, to some degree still don't, have the resources, anything like the resources of the other party. Although we're much bigger than UKIP or the Lib Dems, we don't have anything like as much money as they do. So I think my advice would be is to recognise that we will face that level of scrutiny in future, as I did in the later part of my time as leader. Is to scrape up the resources from somewhere. That will often be voluntary resources. We're not going to have the money to pay for it, and to acknowledge you need that. I through many years of my 4 years as leader was often flying by the seat of my pants in terms of I didn't have time for preparation. I didn't have anyone to prepare me. I just made it work, and most of the time it did. We can't operate on that kind of scale anymore. We do need to get that resources behind the leader so that they've really got the preparation.
But is there also something there, because I know one of the developments you brought in as leader was to have party policy spokespeople, and I'm just wondering whether there's a greater role for that now, in particular with the increased resources that you've got from Parliament, for those spokespeople to have that greater profile, and where the likes of whoever's the next leader, or Caroline or Jenny Jones, can say, actually, this is our spokesperson, this is the person who is our policy expert, this is the person to talk to, rather than feeling that perhaps you need to come up with an answer in the face of hostile questioning.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was one of the things as leader that was my first sort of manifesto was when I stood to be a leader, and we have done a fair bit of progress, and some of the people we've brought in, people like Vic Lothian, who's our education spokesperson from the Isle of Wight, people like Andrew Cooper from up in Yorkshire on energy. They're people who are real experts and have real depth of knowledge there, and we do need to draw on them more, and we need to convince the media to listen to them more, and that's certainly something of the challenge. But what we've also done, and we've developed it to some degree, and we need to go further, is behind them to have a network of policy experts, people who don't necessarily go in front of the camera, but are able to offer advice on a voluntary basis. And that's something we're building up and are building up all the time.
So does that mean, in particular, linking up with academic institutions and other research organisations?
I think it's not so much the institutions as organisations, because obviously they're non-party political, but it's identifying, finding and asking lots of people who have really good will towards the Green Party, really like to support us but don't necessarily know how. Our door is open. We'd love to have you come and talk to us. I mean, I'll anonymise this because I haven't asked him if I can do it publicly, but I was at a meeting about defence policy last night, and someone who's an acknowledged expert in a particular area of that came up to me, and that expert said, hey, I want to work with you. And we very much welcome approaches like that. And we do now have the capacity, the sort of administrative capacity to cope with that, whereas previously perhaps we just lacked the resources to pull that all together.
One of the things that that we had here in Cambridge was, I think for the first time, certainly as far as I can remember, was we had a party standing a full slate of candidates with 50-50 men and women. And I wondered, as someone who's, again, been in that high-profile role, what advice you have to give to people who are going to be following in your footsteps in the Greens. What are the things that you really learnt about yourself that perhaps you weren't aware of before you took on the role as leader?
I think one of the things is to acknowledge that you're going to need help and support, and to acknowledge there are some things that you may not be able to cope with, and just say no. And one of the problems was, because I was the person in that transitional period, we went to the point where my rule with the media was any time, any place, anywhere, if I can physically make it, I will come and talk to you. To be more selective and to acknowledge that if you're not really prepared on a subject, don't go there. But that was a kind of change that, because when I first started, we were so keen to get any media attention at all, that was a real challenge. And we're in a different place, somewhat different place now. I mean, we still would obviously like to get a great deal more media. And I think if you take, for example, the EU referendum campaign, I mean, it's not just us who's a voice that really has hardly been heard in the mainstream media. What we've seen is a Tory leadership contest masquerading as an EU referendum campaign that really is damaging to our democracy. Not right, not fair for the voters, but that's what we've seen. So we've got to fight to get into places, but also acknowledge that some places, that if we don't have the resources to cover it, we're just going to have to let it go.
So, final question. What are your plans for post-leadership work? Because obviously you mentioned you're going to stay in politics. As a former leader, you will still have that profile. So I'm thinking in particular, will you still be, for example, visiting other parts of the country to inspire people to get into politics? That's
very much what I'm aiming to do, and I'm very much aiming, there's a few policy areas that I'd really like to get engaged with. One thing is education policy, because I think what we've seen is teachers, experts, parents and students are acknowledging that we have by far the best education policies of any party. I want to get that out, because so many young people I speak to, even there was a group outside Manchester, a group of 15, 16-year-olds I was speaking to, who were just so angry and so fed up about the way in which their education system is treating them. Exams, schools that are exam factories, shoving them through exam after exam, mental health pressures, just an enormous stress in their lives. So education is one thing. My first degree was agricultural science, so food and farming is something I'm really passionate about. And also just the whole issue of the structure of our economy, how we get an economy that creates jobs you can build a life on, how it gives opportunities to small independent businesses, how it's genuinely prosperous, not dominated by big multinational tax-dodging, low-paying companies.
Okay, Natalie Bennett, thank you very much and good luck.
Thank you very much.